The topic is the restoration of the Scoodic or St. Croix River, and Kim Reeder knows a lot about that, having been on the Community Liaison Committee with NB Power for a while. Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Alan.
Now, you were in these meetings, and naturally I wasn't, but I looked into some facts about dams in order to have an intelligent conversation with you, my end anyway, best I can. I didn't realize that dams have a finite life, that silt builds up behind them, and then the silt doesn't go downstream to protect against storm surges, and that a lot of dams have been removed over North America, dozens, I think, and that hundreds, if not thousands, may actually be dangerous a few miles up from a population center. What did the committee discuss in those topics?
The purpose of the committee is for communication. So two ways. One, for NB Power to communicate through this forum to the community about where they are in the process. But then the second part is for the community to be able to express concerns. And what you're saying, that's actually not one that's come up, but it's very interesting because I actually do a lot of work in asset management. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that there is, all built infrastructure has a life expectancy. They're designed that way. They're designed to meet certain standards. And the other thing is not so much about the physical infrastructure. Like, that was a big conversation with Mac to Quack, right? The physical, the construction, things were deteriorating. That's not the topic of the day for Milltown. The topic of the day for Milltown is a different sort of value, okay? So it's the topic of the day for Milltown is financial value, energy value, community value. And you know what? Those three, it's not meeting any of them.
And that's another thing, pardon me, my interrupting, but there were so many new things I learned. I mean, one is several of these turbines don't actually function. I've always thought of run of the river as a reasonably clean source of electricity. I mean, there's no free lunch, as ecologist Barry Commoner said, but I've always had a good feeling about it, but several of these don't work at all. And I'm told that the amount of power that's generated could be generated with one windmill or some solar panels. Has the community discussed whether they're going to want to replace the power? I mean, they don't get their power from this particular generating station, but has there been any talk of replacing the power?
There was actually at our last meeting, there was a bit of that discussion. And I guess that conversation, you're right, it's not that, and that's what a lot of people don't quite comprehend, is that it's not like that power is being taken out of St. Stephen and we are going to be less power, right? It's more, it feeds into a grid. But the real question there, in my mind at least, is, you know, there's a certain part of NB Power's portfolio, and this is not something we've discussed at the CLC meetings, but there's a certain part of NB Power's portfolio that powers New Brunswick. And then there's a certain part of that portfolio that is for sale and for profit. And I think, you know, before we talk about replacing power, we should talk about conserving power and not using as much power, because I think there's a lot to do in that portfolio too. I guess my question, and when people ask me, you know, why do you care about the dam and this and that, I don't. I care about the river, and I care about what the river could be. And I care about being able to dip my toes in the river and not have to go miles and miles and miles upriver where I feel comfortable, right? Like, what could this river be? Can you imagine a St. Stephen without the river? If you can't, it's got to hold some sort of value to you. So it's about people expressing that value. I would love to hear what kind of value that river holds to people, and then build on top of that. Instead of building on top of all these unknowns and assumptions, why don't we kind of find the ground? What is the river's value to us? Where do we think, what potential do we think it has? Unrealized potential, right? And it would kind of, in that, represent the unrealized potential in ourselves as well, right? And having a physical way to express it, which would be kind of neat.
I think that's really a stimulating way to think about it. And the things that came to my mind as you were speaking is, number one, Richard Florida, the urban planner, who's pretty popular these days, has said that people like living near water and that young people like to go to those kinds of places. You know, St. Stephen, St. Andrews, the #1 tourist destination in North America, according to USA Today
Exactly.
readers. And I've sometimes quipped with Richard Florida that, well, you know, we have no choice. The rivers were our waterways for the first few hundred years after Europeans came here. You couldn't get around otherwise. So he's kind of discovered something that had to exist, but we'll leave that for another conversation. But the second thing I think about is that when I'm going to and from New Brunswick, I try to stop at Bangor for a couple of reasons, shopping, things like that. But in Brewer, there's a great seafood restaurant, and it is right on the river. And to have that experience that you're talking about, I don't put my toes in it, but to have that experience that you're talking about really makes for a very nice part of the trip. And that is a vision that I might have for St. Stephen as well.
Absolutely. There's so many different ideas that I guess that is the one thing I hope about this, is that this can be a catalyst for us to realize some of our potential. And all it takes is people power, right? So, you know, like that's what change takes, is just us to decide we're doing something. So let's decide, like, you know, let's get on with this. You know, if you envision a floating library out on the St. Croix, the satellite library, right? Or if you know, like, not that I'm saying a whole bunch of built infrastructure is what we need, because I'm not saying that, but I am saying that the communities change. And, you know, there used to be over 100 wharves in the downtown St. Stephen area. That was something at one point. That was something before the Milltown Dam was there, right? And now, and then things change. Those are not part of our community anymore. There are remnants of them, but they're not part of our community anymore. And when the values of the community change, the environment changes to reflect that.